Warm welcome to all our guests to this evening talk series in our Golden Jubilee year. So today we are so fortunate to have with us a very eminent speaker, Padma Bhushan Dr. M.B. Atreya, pioneer of Indian management movement. I would now request our chapter chairman, Mr. Mukesh Jain, to welcome Dr. Atreya and the guests. Mr. Jain.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my proud privilege to welcome the father of Indian management, Padma Bhushan, Dr. M.B. Atreya, sir. We are all grateful to Dr. Atreya for accepting our invitation and guide us on a very important topic, powering Indian HRD to face China. I also welcome national leadership, past national presidents and chapter chairperson of ISTD, all my seniors and friends from ISTD, NIPM, NHRD, DMA, FMA, Rotary and other organizations. Now I will not come between you and Dr. Atreya. Would request Pratamaji to carry on, please. Namaskar.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jain. So before I invite Dr. Atreya, I would request our Secretary, Delhi Chapter, Mr. Ajay Sahu, to introduce Dr. Atreya. Although he doesn't need any introduction, but, still the protocol calls it.
Mr. Sahu, please don't read out the whole biodata. Just say a few key points, short, yes. Thank you.
Ajay, you should unmute. Ajay, you have to unmute.
All right. I can fully understand why Mr. Mukesh Jain and Mrs. Pratima Kaushal, they did not want to introduce Dr. Atreya. It's a very difficult task. And if I am to give all his accomplishments and achievements, I'll be taking up the entire 1 hour, which has been allotted. But very briefly, you must have seen the movie Swades, which came in 2004. And Dr. Atreya was the original Mohan Bhargava of Swades. He came back to India in 1978 from London, giving up his very lucrative assignment in London Business School and Scotland. He is the first, he is one of the first doctorates from the Harvard Business School. And not only in the training and HR domain, he has contributed to the Indian economy by being the chairperson for the IT, the Telecom Committee way back in 1994. And he has been conferred with Padma Bhushan in 2014. So I met him first time in NTPC when I was in management training. So we were in so much awe in front of him when he came there. And I did not know that I would be introducing him on such an occasion. A very warm welcome, Dr. Atreya. Over to you. Pritimaji, you can take over.
Pritimaji, you have to unmute.
From here? You can speak. No, but you have to.
Pritimaji, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I think Dr. Atreya can go ahead.
Yeah.
Dr. Atreya, sir.
Yes.
Cover page, yeah. Two more slides before this. Okay. Well, Mr. Jain, Chairman, Mr. Sahu, Secretary, Pratima Kaushal, the coordinator, all the guests there, ladies and gentlemen, and maybe also people who are listening from their own offices and homes digitally. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. Thanks to Mr. Jain for the invitation to do one of these evening talks. I like the idea of members to members. We have a lot of talent and human capital, and we must benefit from each other. As you know, in my mind, China has been a challenge for the last 40 years. I first spoke about it in 1980. And since then, it has grown stronger and stronger. And today, it is a major threat to us. So I'd like to take this topic of how we can power HRD. There are many other strategies which are required. We have to strengthen the military. We have to have a very creative foreign policy, alliances of various kinds. But finally, it is the economy that will count, the strength of the economy. We are way behind, and the stronger we are, it will have a deterrent effect on China. So I chose this topic. And I'm delighted to be here with you. Thanks for the introduction. First of all, my compliments to all our members in Delhi and all over the country that this society has now reached its 50th year. I was at IIM Calcutta, 1967 to 73, and I remember the excitement with which ISTD was founded. I was one of the early members, and I'm a fellow of the Institute, and I take great pride. And the ISTD as a society has made an enormous contribution to India's training and development. I follow Bill Gates' rule that 5 slides in a PowerPoint presentation to allow enough room for your questions and so on. There will be some data slides in between. So I'd like to briefly give you an overview of the presentation. Let us understand the dimensions of the China challenge and what role HRD has played in China's rise. And compared to that, what are the Indian HRD gaps? And how can we power our strategies? We already have some, we've been doing reasonably well. If China were a democracy like us with an opposition party, it will not so easily take military actions and threaten and so on. There will be some discussion, there will be some voices there for friendship, but China is a highly organized corporate communist party structure. They are following all the HRD principles in training and developing their own party leaders at various levels. It's a formidable machine, and we have to contend with it. And I'd like to conclude, those of you who have heard me before will remember that every one of my presentations, anywhere on any subject, I conclude with an action plan. It is not just for sharing ideas, but what can we do? Due to the Delhi's polluted air, I have a mild cold. Occasionally, I may clear my throat, but don't worry, I will continue. China is actually a challenge to the whole world. In fact, it was playing with Trump. Now, the return of Biden and the Democratic Party, democracy, will cope with this challenge. People in the European Union, which is a very powerful, big economic setup, 350 million people, and the US, Asia Pacific, countries like Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, along with us, have to deal with this threat. China and Russia together are putting up the thesis that democracy is not the best form of governance. They feel that a party dictatorship is the best form. This is what they want to prove. So it's a challenge to the whole world. They dominate manufacturing. They have a high positive trade balance with all countries, but particularly to India, because we are their immediate neighbor. And therefore, we share a long border, 3,700 kilometers. Atal Bihari Vajpayee once said that you don't choose your parents and your neighbors. They happen to you. You have to cope with them, whatever they are. China, which was equal to India in 1980, has transformed itself into an economic giant. So I'm not just criticizing China, I also admire the Chinese people for their hard work, sacrifice, even under dictatorship, and their ambition. And over a period of time, from cheap goods, they have come to more and more quality goods. They've also now gone into R&D. They have built a military might. Some of you may have read a recent report that they have prepared a special plan till 2027, only a military plan, nothing to do with any part of the economy, assuming the economy will grow. The aim of that military plan is by 2027 to be equal to the US military. That's what they're planning. Now, if we have next door a power like the US, you can imagine that what kind of influence, threat, pressure they can put on India. Xi Jinping, the current chairman of the Communist Party, has become a dictator. He has made the party change the rules. Deng Xiaoping had brought a very good rule that, like the American president, the Chinese party president can only have 2 terms. You may know that that 2-term rule has been specially suspended for Xi Jinping, and he is to be president for life. That gives him a great leadership strength in that there will be continuity in strategic thinking and initiatives. Unlike the switches between UPA, NDA, various kinds of parties, and so there's both a strength because wrong strategies will not be taken. Hitler in the 20th century paid a heavy price for taking Germany into war, and it is possible that China may pay a price. Therefore, we should not allow a war to take place. The whole world should together, with India playing a leading role, deter China. And Xi Jinping has published a China dream that by 2045, they will be world leaders. I have several times gone to China, and 10, 20 years ago, the Chinese intellectuals will talk to me in a very affectionate manner. They will talk about the past history when India and China were very close, spiritually alike. We gave them Buddhism, and they used to talk about 2 heavens in the world, Western heaven India and Eastern heaven China. From that, we have now become potential adversaries. So how they have built their strength, this is a graph of in billions of dollars, the inflow of FDI. The blue line is the inflow that took place between 2005 and 2015. But the Chinese have also started their foreign investment outside, the Belt and Road Initiative, trying to cover much of the world, colonize indirectly. Pakistan is already a semi-colony, and trapping many countries into a debt trap, which they cannot repay. There is no resource for HRD. So the Chinese invested heavily in 2 things, in health and education. You may have seen the recent Finance Commission report by N.K. Singh, where they have recommended that our allocation to health should increase from 0.95% last year to 2.5% by 2024. But the Chinese are already spending 6% of GDP on health. So every citizen there is fit and healthy, tagada. And we have a lot of illness, various kinds of infections. Even without COVID, we have a number of deaths due to the classic TB, cancer, and so on. So better late than never. We have to spend more on first health and second on education. In India, the primary education has been very weak, schools, teachers. So I think the government's role is not HRD. That is the industry role, an NGO role. But how will government spend? They are not unwilling to spend, they want to spend. But we have deficits. We don't have enough GDP, not enough tax income, direct taxes, indirect taxes, not enough public debt. So we have to, as an economy, through corporates, through industry, large, medium, small scale industries, raise our productivity and create a wealth where government can spend more on health and education. Chinese were known in the 1950s and 60s, like Japan was earlier, 1930s, as a cheap, low quality goods producer, but they have taken their labor force up the skill ladder. And as you may know, many Chinese factories are operating with high technology, even robots, artificial intelligence, which multiplies the workers' productivity. while we have lots of institutes of management and MBA programs, the Chinese have not lagged behind. They also have modern management, but from the very beginning, they did not take in American management or European management or Chinese management. They always say Chinese style. So they adapted it to what is that style? One party, dictatorship, loyalty to the party, control of the party representative in every factory and office around the country. Even the CEOs and so on at some point members of the party. So they have a management process adapted to the Chinese political and economic structure. And the central government of China and their 36 provinces, local governments, they all have taken the Communist Party's goal from Deng Xiaoping's time that industrialization is our top objective, matching the West. So there has been competition between their provinces to attract foreign investment. So they gave land, water, electricity, all the utilities very readily. The only state in India in which this happened was Gujarat, where I think industry has grown, large industry, huge investments. And there are 5 other 6 states we are following. More recently, under Yogi Adityanath, UP is trying to improve ease of business and attracting investment. So I think we need this cooperation. But since different parties rule in the center and the states, and there is always tension, and that power of coordination, China has achieved for 20 years, 10 to 12% per annum growth. Amazing. We touched 8% in some years. Now there is a global economic consensus that given India's population resource constraints, 7% per annum real terms is the maximum growth possible, unless we remove these constraints in terms of budgetary surpluses, investments, foreign investment, better labor laws which are coming. And China also, within the communist system, it fostered entrepreneurs. What we are now doing, startups, stand up, the Prime Minister's appeal in his Independence Day speeches, this they have done, and they have very rapidly built global giant entrepreneurs like Ant and various other Jack Ma and so on. And they're coming up in newer and newer sectors. Okay. Now, the Economic Times published a report recently comparing the gross enrollment ratio in schools of Indian students and Chinese students. We were nearby 25 and 23 in 2011. Even within the last 9 years, they are able to scale up very fast. Taken this gross enrollment ratio to 49 and 50.6, India is still at 28. Okay. So what are the Indian HRD gaps? From this, it is now evident that we have a huge backlog in human development. Even now, adult illiteracy. Children go to school and parents are not able to help them on their homework. Poor attendance. So we must allow and enable and help government with surpluses to invest in human development, central and state, and also it should be part of the corporate social responsibility. Wherever we have the funds, this year it is going into COVID, but later when we are out of it, back to the health education, local development. Indian industry has been too focused on the familiar domestic market. We have not been as aggressive as the Chinese on exports. Even today, Vietnam and Bangladesh are going ahead of us in exports. So we have to have entrepreneurs, managements, which will go, travel, learn, take risks, build partnerships. The Indian economy has a strong domestic market, which is good, but you cannot grow at 7-8% only on the domestic market. exports are very important. Arvind Panagaria, who was in Niti Aayog, has written a book recently saying that India can still be an export powerhouse, and he has suggested various strategies. Our scales are much smaller. Those of you who have traveled to China, in 1985, I already saw the development of Pudong next to Shanghai, the kind of infrastructure, bridges, highways, huge factories, and you would have seen pictures of those factories. They rival European and American factories. Some of them have been built by foreign investment, US investment, but much larger because there is more manpower in China, which they can leverage. We also have technology lags. From about 2000, the Chinese stopped comparing themselves with India at all. No Indian economic comparisons. They were comparing themselves with only one country in the world, and that was the US. Their whole aim was to equal and exceed the US. We have been thinking small in incremental doses. I have spoken about this in many fora, the AMP in Srinagar, various IMA conferences, that we have to scale up, think big, vision. There are few who have done it. Mukesh Ambani, Adani, Tata Group, IT industry, Infosys, Wipro, and so on, scaling up. But I think this has to come to many other industries. The motorcycle industry has done very well. Okay. Now, why Trump got elected in the US? Because the US working class found that it was getting poorer and poorer, more unemployment during the earlier periods of Bill Clinton admitted China into WTO in 2001, although it was a communist country, no market economy, no domestic competition, lots of restraints on foreign investment. He and the EU admitted him into WTO on the hope that trade will make China a democracy. Trade will liberalize the Chinese political system. That has not happened. In fact, they have benefited from trade. They have stolen technology. They have manipulated their currency. And the US has suffered, and also European countries, on unemployment. And so the 2016 election was a rebellion against the current economics and global trade policy. Hopefully, Biden will restore some of it, but he will also take care that China does not exploit. If you look at the manufacturing by value added in manufacturing output, this is amazing. China has 28% share. The US, which was a leading economy, has only relatively, US share is strong because of another partner going up. India is a poor 3%. So China is 9 times our GDP size. So how do we match them? But we cannot give up. We have to start from now and scale up as fast as we can. China is slowing down, 6%, 5% growth. They are beginning to have shortage of manpower. Their one child policy has reduced the younger population. We have this huge benefit called the demographic dividend, but unless they are healthy, trained, skilled, employed, it is no use to us. Okay. So what are the strategies we need? One thing we need is massive investments in human development. I have emphasized this point by central and state governments, industry, foreign aid agencies. We have to make our people fit, active, educated up to a certain level, at least class 12. And then this new education policy has some very good points about streaming into vocational education and training. And those classes have to be utilized. So ISTD and its various chapters may liaise with the local universities, colleges, speak there, talk to the faculty, principals, to have a system whereby, like the German apprentice system, we will have young people, not all of them going for a BA, BCom, some kind of a paper degree and looking for a Sarkari job, but from class 12 itself, streaming people off into skills which they have and offering them industrial training, internship, and absorbing them finally. We also need a strong government business partnership. Till 1991, during Mrs. Gandhi's time and earlier, I have also spoken about this in many places, government business relationship in India was adversarial. The civil servants and bureaucrats did not want to be seen in the company of businessmen and managers. Fortunately, this has changed a great deal. There is very good communication. The FICCI, CII, ASSOCHAM, all the major chambers are having dialogues with the government, giving policy inputs. But I think this Chinese invasion in the border here is a big warning for us. The old assumption that we will be friends has been broken. We have a sufficient warning now to pull ourselves, and government alone cannot do it, business alone cannot do it. We have to have a strong partnership. In this, I would appeal, business has the better skills. We are pragmatic. Sometimes politicians and civil servants are ideological, rigid. But I think how businessmen like Ambani and Adani and others have succeeded is their communication with government, persuasion, patience, doing it step by step. We also need massive upgradation. Recently, you would be hearing that India must enter the global supply chains. China is dominating those chains. So those supply chains require not only investment and resources, but also upgrading the skills of the Indian worker to be able to do it. And the Indian management, senior management, top management, must now be looking at not only India vision and strategies, they must be looking at global vision and strategies. This is a point I made to the Ranbaxy management in 1992 when we made a first 10-year plan till 2002 to Dr. Parvinder Singh, that they have to have a drastic mindset change. They have to dissociate themselves from the Indian landmass, go into space. Look at India as only one of the countries in this world. Forget the thought of mother country, home country, country of origin. And then look at worldwide, where is the demand for pharma products? Where are the better margins? What kind of drugs are needed? So to put in place a world regional management, like a true multinational, first create the position. Don't wait for becoming a multinational. Investment in management talent is the first step. And that regional director in Delhi for South Asia, Hong Kong for Asia Pacific, Johannesburg for Africa, London for Europe, New York for the US. So cover the world and also supply India as one country. And India's share in the total turnover has to fall from 80% down to 10%. I think that model is still valid. More and more Indian companies, and I think you should suggest it to your line management and top managements. Be audacious, take risks. They may initially laugh at you. They may reject what you're saying, but persist. Otherwise, we will become more and more marginal in the world economy. For example, Sri Lanka is a member of the recent Asian trade bloc, which is dominated by China. We are not in it because we don't have the confidence to join. We feel that our domestic economy will be dominated. So we are going back into a protectionist mode, which should be stopped. This can be done if we develop the management to think globally, and our employees to have pride in India, made in India. There is a huge gap between the Chinese workers' sense of pride and our employee who is still dependent on the organization, just doing enough. But the productivity gap is very high. Productivity will increase if we bring in more investment, technology, and training. So it's a good thing that government renamed the Ministry of HRD as the Ministry of Education, because that's their job. School, college, university, that is their job. They have to create the human resources with health and basic education. It is the industry which will do HRD. So this will come back to the right paradigm now. Excuse me. Now, so I will conclude with my action plan and then invite questions from the audience. I noticed that you have a chat box and there's a good audience there, and also from their homes and offices. So as I'm going through this, please start sending in your questions, which the moderator can put to me. I now think that we cannot rely on politics, political parties, even if there are very good people, like the Prime Minister himself, some excellent ministers in this cabinet, to name a few of them, Gadkari, Piyush Goyal, Nirmala Sitharaman, who have industry experience, former chartered accountants, and likewise in state government, people like Devendra Fadnavis, engineer, CM. So government skills are coming up. The next generation, young people like Tejasvi, who has been sent from Bangalore to West Bengal for the election battle at the age of 24. So talent is coming up in the political parties also. But the Indian industry has to be the spokesperson, the campaigner, mobilize and advise government on how we can scaling up. We've been talking about change agent within the company, managing change, good, but we have to now take on the nation's behalf, on our people's behalf, being a change agent of the whole economy, both in your sector, along with competitors. When it comes to dialogue with government, there is no competition. We have a common interest. The chambers together. So I think I would like every ISTD trainer to be thinking of how we can, as trainers, catalyze, accelerate this change and enable our top management to take this responsibility collectively with government. Now, government does not have industrial thinking. It cannot have strategic thinking. A few in government may do so. So it is industry which has to go with mega projects, draft projects. You don't spend too much money, but you invest some money. 1% of the project cost in this kind of communication, lobby, education. So both infrastructure projects and manufacturing. They will have huge employment potential, job potential. So if we can get our states and the center to do these things gradually, every project will create income and it will have a multiplier effect, demand, consumption, and the rest of Indian industry will benefit. Also, I think we must aim for something like 30 to 40% of that output in some cases going for export markets. So we have to retain and attract investment for world scale and technical partnerships. So I think the Chinese businessmen have done that. They have gone around the world, they have convinced, they have shown credibility, they have brought them back, they have shown their contacts in government, and finally the agreement and the investment has taken place. The first 5 years were difficult in the 6 special economic zones that were created in southern China Rim. But now, the whole of China has been inundated with projects. It is very difficult for the US and Europe to withdraw entirely. They have to slowly transfer the manufacturing. And already they're transferring some of the manufacturing to Vietnam. India is not competitive. We should step up. we should, in India, we have too many medium and small companies. Now the law allows us for mergers and acquisitions. There was a time in India, till about 1980, I was a cost accountant in GKW in the 1960s. Worked there, came back from US and UK. In India, acquisition was considered papam, sin. And the company being taken over was called the victim. The company taking over was called the predator. This is nonsense. There has to be a market, two kinds of market. A market for products and services, which the consumer buys, and a market for businesses. Businesses which are not well managed by the current management and can be better managed by another management, which will benefit all stakeholders, shareholders, customers, business partners, dealers, vendors, consumers, and government in form of more taxes. So the better managed companies should be allowed to take over. It is good that the Reserve Bank has invited DBS from Singapore to take over the Lakshmi Vilas Bank. But that's the case of a sick bank. Even well-running companies can be run better. We should give up this idea of excessive sympathy for the small company and antipathy to a big company. So it's only through this acquisition, merger, and internal expansion. China has so many companies in Fortune 500, we have very few. We also have to groom world-class management. Some of the multinationals in India are doing it. Hindustan Lever, ITC, the Novartis. Some of these companies, as part of their global management practices, are rotating foreign managers in India, rotating Indian managers abroad. But every Indian company should do this. Every Indian company should rotate Indians abroad, bring foreigners also into India. I think, imagine, we have to dream. We have to be audacious, as Obama will say. So that's my action plan, suggestion to all of you. It is a big thing. We have no choice. China is such a huge gorilla next door. We have to try. We have to do our best. We have to move. There's no option. So I know it is difficult. It will not happen tomorrow, but I'll be failing in my duty unless I highlight the enormity of the challenge and some ways in which we can meet it. Thank you very much. I now await the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atreya. It was indeed a lucid and very enriching session. So now we have questions in the chat box. 4 or 5 questions are there. So the first question is by Mr. Sumit Chaudhary. He's asking, respected sir, what is your considered assessment of Biden's relationship with China as different from that of Trump, and immediate and medium-term repercussion for India?
Biden's relationship with China?
That's right.
Okay. I think Biden has had past business contact with China. He knows some of the American companies who have invested in China. Okay. So I think he'll be pragmatic. He will have a mixture of friendship with China, where China is playing a fair game, and opposition to China, where it is exploiting the global system. So it will not be like Trump, blind anger and just duties and so on to satisfy the American working class. So Biden will try to do a more integrative conflict resolution, give China the opportunity to become a constructive partner for mutual benefit. But if China is very difficult to deal with, they will say all kinds of things by words, but actions will not change. They have the arrogance that they want the rest of the world to adjust to them, and they will not adjust to the rest of the world. I have seen, for example, Indian tire industry for the last 20 years suffer from the Chinese yuan being undervalued. They will not raise the value from 6 yuan to a dollar to 7 or 8, which is what they should have done. So Biden will put pressure, and in this he will have the cooperation of the European Union and Asia Pacific. In fact, he has announced 2 days ago that within the 100 days of his office, he will call a global summit of democracy. That's a beautiful statement. Only democracy. China will not be there. Turkey will not be there. Pakistan cannot be there. So India will be a major member. And those democracies will together debate how to deal with the single party dictatorship states like China and Russia. So Biden will be sensible, not wild, but not weak. And I think he will try to negotiate a better deal, not only for the US, but for the whole world with China.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Atria. So the second question is by Dr. Bushrai, Akhil Bushrai. He's asking, sir, would you justify sacrificing individual freedom for economic growth with reference to your China example?
To be frank, I have said this before, and some people have criticized me for it. I've said this in public platforms. In 1950s, when I was at school, if the Indian Communist Party leadership had been competent and strong enough like Mao, and if there had been an Indian revolution, I would have supported it at that time. It would have employed all our people. It would have utilized the human resources and natural resources. It would have been a significant player in the world economy. But we opted for other values, and the party was not strong. In fact, the left has been highly disappointed in the last 30, 40 years. Their share of seats in parliament and assemblies is coming down and down. This recent Bihar 16 seats is a bit of a freak. So today, we don't have that option. We have gone too far down the road of democracy, and we have succeeded. Not in comparison to China, but the whole world is actually very pleasantly surprised. In 1950s and 60s, some of you may have read, I was young and I read them then, you may have read it in the library. Gunnar Myrdal wrote the 3-volume Asian drama, and there were people writing books like Indian Crisis. India was expected to fail economically, break up as a country. I was in Harvard in 1967 when people were asking me all over. I would speak at Rotary clubs and so on. After Nehru, what will happen to India? Will it break up? I had the confidence at that time to say that don't worry about Nehru. Nobody is indispensable. India has a lot of depth. The freedom movement has thrown up leaders. And sure enough, Lal Bahadur Shastri came. It's a tragedy for the country that he died in 1966. If he had been alive for the next 10, 15 years, India would have liberalized the economic policy because he was like Patel, Rajagopalachari, not like Nehru. He was not anti-industry. He was not anti-entrepreneurship, business-government friendship. He was pragmatic. So we lost that. And as you know, Indira Gandhi went back into socialism. Her advisors were Ashok Mitra and Mohan Kumar Amangalam. What do you expect? Bank nationalization and various kinds of public sector investment without autonomy for business performance. So we, today, despite that, from 1980 onwards, we have had some more gradual liberalization. If China were not next door, India would be considered a success, 5th largest economy, per capita income rising. And if we improved our ease of doing business and our labor, which we are now doing, we would get much more investment. So today, we cannot go back and have a model which sacrifices liberty for economic growth. We have to work with this system, within this system. And the answer there is discipline, self-discipline. Every citizen, every worker, every trainer, every industrialist, we have to bring it. We are the catalyst. So we have to show, this is why I've been talking about since 1980, management and Indian philosophy. We have to go back to the Gita, Karma Yoga, Shrestha Dharma, Vyakti Dharma. So not because of money, not because of government pressure or party threat, we will work because it's our country and it is our duty, our dharma to do so. We have to instill this spirit in every employee.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So the next question is by Mr. Dr. G.P. Rao. He's asking lower manpower productivity and inadequacy in business acumen. Which one is a bigger cause for the gap between China and India? So between lower manpower productivity and inadequacy in business acumen. And
I think the big
is,
gap
can
is
we
in
catch
two
up?
areas. It is not in the competence of the Indian manager. It is not in the motivation and willingness to work of the Indian worker. Our two big gaps are in technology and investment. We have to find out, mobilize massive investment and go upgrade our technologies continuously. Right now, make one leapfrog and then continuous upgradation. And for this, we have to mobilize both Indian savings and foreign investment. We must go and get a lot of FDI. Government alone, by changing laws and making announcements, Prime Minister speaking in various fora cannot do it. Every Indian corporate management should be a negotiator and a brilliant negotiator, a charmer, sell India's future and bring the investment. We have to do that. How can an industry secretary or a few bureaucrats do this? The corporates have to. So two things clearly: much larger investment, much bigger scales than we can imagine. Like Jio out of the blue, 4 or 5 years, it has become such a huge digital enterprise because Mukesh has a digital India vision. He is doing more for it than the government. So we have to have corporates in India, like they say, what is good for GM is good for America. The 5 technical companies now, how they dominate the economy, how their GDP together is bigger than many countries. So we have to have these two. The Indian worker is capable. He has to be led. If we give him these two, he will become productive. The Indian workers are already working on high technology and investment in some companies in India. We have to multiply and scale that model. We are a very intelligent race. People are clever. Qualifications are not the only thing, but it is leadership and inputs.
Right. Thank you, sir. Next question is by Mr. Ajay Sahu. He's asking, is there any sector in our economy, example, the generic vaccine, any sector at all where India can be world leader?
Yes, I think we have so far relied too much on the services sector. We have taken a false satisfaction that a lot of export earnings from IT industry, the big ones, they're brilliant companies, Infosys, TCS, Wipro, HCL, and so on. But you cannot run a huge country of 1.3 billion people on the services sector. You need manufacturing, big manufacturing. Europe has a 28% share China has of global manufacturing. So yes, we can, industries like vaccine is a great promise. This COVID will continue for some more years. To inoculate 7 billion people around the world will take a long time. And by that time, as Bill Gates predicts, there will be the next pandemic. There will be a series of pandemics. Therefore, I think we should build the vaccine industry in a big way. At the moment, we are importing. But this China can do. For example, if the current Indian government decided this as a strategy, they can do it. They can do a massive project on vaccines. But the opposition, the press will criticize them. They're neglecting all other industries. They're putting all the money into it. As a democracy, we are paralyzed in taking big steps at a government level. So it is industry which is doing. So the vaccine industry should have Indian leadership. People like Adar Poonawalla and other colleagues work together, and they can then attract other Indian corporates to diversify, not into management, would put 10% investment, the Tata Group and various other groups, and then bring in foreign investment. So we must dream very big, and people will come. People trust Indian democracy, Indian rule of law. They like our managers and attitudes. So, but we have to present the plan. They will not come and plan it for us.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, the next question is by Dr. Sunil Abrol, and this is regarding our professional bodies. He's asking, what strategy would you recommend for professional bodies like ISTD, IMA, IMCI, etc.?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of creative things that we can do. I've already mentioned in my talk at various places, ISTD national headquarters and the chapters at the national level and at state level, the respective levels, seek a meeting and make presentations and so on. Then all professional bodies together, IMCI, HRE Network, NIPM, ISTD together. And I think here the ISTD leadership can take an initiative. Anyone can take an initiative. Somebody should be a kind of a Pradhan
Right.
Sevak and not chairman, president. And together do this for the country. So the professional bodies together should play a job of visioning, education, presentations, research, information to the government, and it will work over a period of time. And also in the press, public domain. For example, in the recent, a small point, Bihar Assembly election. For the first time, the voting motivation has shifted from social caste issues to development issues. Jobs,
Yeah.
industry, investment. So people are changing. We are letting them down. The Indian elite, we as intellectuals, Buddhijeevis, we are failing this country. We have to, so Dr. Abrol, I think each one of you can play a role in mobilizing this. Let ISTD begin. If ISTD begins, the others will say, what is these trainers, what talking big? Don't worry, go on, march, ekla chalo, like Mao marched in Yunnan. So I think we have to have that conviction. When I came back in 1967, I had in my mind an Indian management mission. 5-10 years, I put up with a lot of insults. A lot of people in the audiences said, "Kya management, kya baat kar rahe ho? Chote ho, kya experience hai? Hindustan mein nahi chalega. Either license chahiye aur kuch nahi chahiye." So they were demotivating. I said, no, forget it. It's not enough to have IITs. Engineers are good, not enough. We must have managers. Let them also study management. I had so much conviction. And in one ISTD meeting in IIT Chennai, I had a long argument with Charu Ranganekar and N.S. Ramaswamy, who were my seniors. I was much younger, but my conviction was very, today, management is everywhere in the country, in every industry, not just manufacturing, hotel management, tourism management, fashion management, luxury management. There are institutes giving MBAs in all these kinds of degrees, 1,000 institutes. So I think ISTD should begin. Don't hesitate. I'll say this to every institute. We intellectuals, professionals must play a role beyond our companies and our profession to transform this country. And you should give this value to all your juniors. Keep sowing seeds. Don't worry, they'll sprout. Some tomorrow, some next year, some 2 years later. So we have to be missionaries for Indian economic growth to bridge the gap with China. We'll never equal China. From 1/9, let us come to half. That'll help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Atreya. So the next question is from my friend, Mr. Deepak Bahara. He's saying, Dr. Atreya ji, that China is getting choked due to increase in manufacturing capacities. Would you advise India to follow the same path, or should we move to some other competitive countries?
I think we are a long way from choking. China has gone a long way, therefore they're facing it. Your point is well taken. We should not over-rely on manufacturing in the next 10-20 years, as we have done on services so far. But I think for a 10-15-year window, there is a huge opportunity in manufacturing. And it's backward and forward linkages, raw material, transportation, logistics, and downside, the product distribution service, that whole chain will work employ Indian workers, and will also do export. Meantime, you are right, we should be developing new technologies for IoT, cloud business, various other kinds of things. So we have to visualize. So every large company should have a visioning exercise, a 5 to 10 year vision, and begin that with the technology vision, not with the economic vision. Technology is the fastest changing issue in the world today, and the new technologies will have the market, there's no question. So every company should have now a technology vision and build its business plan around the technology vision. So the character and mix of Indian economy will keep changing. But right now, the pragmatic priority is manufacturing.
Right. Thank you, sir. So the next question is by Emeritus Professor Dr. D.K. Banwit. He's asking, apart from research focus, academic industry interaction always being discussed. Now,
Okay.
Ministry of Education to take care of school, colleges, universities only, whereas industry to take care of HRD. Can you please clear this dilemma?
There can be some interface and cooperation also. Government has IITs, industry has to utilize them. Government has vocational training centers. So wherever government is interested and involved, you've got a good officer. So we can tell government that you produce healthy, competent, good class 12 graduates, BTech, Polytechnic. We will take care of them. For example, I remember particularly Wipro and of course TCS and others also. They had their manpower requirements are huge, 100,000, 300,000. There is no way they can get it from IITs and the premier colleges. So they went to second tier, third tier towns and spoke to students in the first year, second year, orienting them towards IT, coding and other kinds of things. And then they went back to the campus and absorbed them. So we have to have this kind of cooperation with government as well as academia. It is ESI. What is ESI? Enlightened self-interest. Aage investment, piche rewards. You have first 2-3 years, you have to invest in these outside institutions. Nothing will come. Then the returns will start flowing. Even when they are in the academic institution, public or private, we can begin this process of orienting them to industry. And one of the things industry has to do in this manufacturing renaissance is to stop, reduce brain drain. The dream of all bright students in IITs and NITs and so on is to how to go to America. Pathetic. The Trump's restrictions on H1 visa is good for India. We'll retain the talent. We must draw the talent back. When in my visits in China, they would always talk about the PRC returning, People's Republic of China returnee from US and Europe, who would have gained education, work experience, and also done some spying on technologies. They will come back home. Indian return rates are much lower. So I think this is a partnership and government primarily health and education, industry HRD and utilization, but an interface where the two can work together.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. I think there are many other questions. There are 2-3 more questions, but we are running out of time. It's already 7 o'clock. So what do you suggest? Should I take 1 or 2 more questions or can we?
I don't mind if people are willing to stay. 2 more questions.
Okay, fine.
Am I
2
giving
more
long answers? Should I give shorter answers?
All right. Okay, so this is from a student of Lloyd Business School. He's Bhumika Prasad. He's asking, it has been felt that the government is keen to shift to privatization for development of the nation. Although there are many advantages of privatization, no doubt, what are your views regarding this with respect to corruption in the people? Will it not disrupt people from thinking about the country even more and make them want to work for their individual interests?
Yeah. You see, this has been a long debate. In my telecom committee report for restructuring DOT, which is completely Sarkari, we recommended a 4-stage approach, and this is still valid. It's permanently valid. It can be implemented. So for public enterprises, what government can do is to first divest. So it is disinvestment and not privatization. And disinvestment word is much more acceptable to political parties, unions, and so on. So sell 26%. Give up primary management, but have a veto on special resolutions with the 26%. When that works quite well over a 3 to 4 year period, bring ownership down to 49%. give the private party 51%, they have majority, and then government will get a bonanza. If the company does well, the market price of the share will go up so much that the remaining 49% can be sold in gradual doses, not to upset the market, 5% at different times, and government will get enormous amount of money. And ultimately, give the private party total ownership, like we have done in Maruti. Government is now completely 100% Suzuki owned company. Government had 50%. And Maruti share is doing very well in the market, despite the recent fall because of COVID. It's always been a good investment. So that is a model. Don't suddenly throw out, but gradual steps.
Right.
So we said that don't invest any more money in BSNL and MTNL. Gradually reduce the manpower. And even give a voluntary handshake, golden handshake, which is expensive. But that is an investment to free technology into the country. Cell phone technology, private parties, competition. This whole IT revolution could not have taken place. IT, as you know, communication plus computing is IT. We had computing, but not communication. So this telecom revolution has created the possibility for IT. We can work 24 hours a day with any part of the world communicating. And I like that we should, for example, there's no need for government to make steel. We've got enough steel companies. There's no need for government to generate power. We've got enough power companies. So in many fields where public investment was initially necessary, justified to break the ground, now it is no longer necessary. Government should be an independent. So we made 3 recommendations in the telecom report. Government should be primarily in policy. There should be an independent regulator, and there should be operating industry. So the TRAI has come, and there is an appeal procedure to TDSAT, and it's working quite well. The problem of the telecom industry now is competition that they have to face. Airtel and Vodafone cannot complain to government that Jio is doing this. Match them. As Mukesh said in one of the meetings, big boys don't cry. Face your competition. That's what we should do. Gradual reduction of government involvement in an area where they have no skills.
Okay. Right, sir. Thank you. So now we have the last question of Professor Radha Sharma. She's asking, esteemed Dr. Atreya, management institutions produce human capital for industry. Kindly share your thoughts for them for bridging India-China gap.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, greetings to Dr. Radha Sharma of the MDI and many others in the audience whom I have known before.
Right.
The industry is doing both, utilizing human capital and in that very process generating more valuable human capital. So I have always stressed this point that at the beginning of a career, whether worker, skilled, semi-skilled or manager, the young man, young woman's potential is grossly underutilized. So our job is to utilize that potential through the right kinds of skills and placement and rotation and so on. But as we do that, the potential itself is growing. So what was good utilization of yesterday's potential is underutilization today. So we have to keep developing that capital. Some of them will leave us. Don't be angry. Let them go. That's our contribution. Send them as ambassadors with goodwill. So industry has to create human capital as well as utilize it and generate it. So today you will see that in industry, there are many people who are ex-L&T, ex-Mahindra, ex-Tata, Levers, ITC. They speak with pride about their previous company, but they're also doing a great job in their new company. So the big companies in India should become pools of talent and follow the GE policy, let 5-10% go every year, bring in new 5-10% and train them. So good for you and good for renewal of other organizations. So industry has a huge role. We are the ones who understand human capital. And the Indian human capital at the moment is grossly underutilized. Some people overwork at high stress at the top level, but the bulk of the organization is not mobilized, energized, motivated. Only the world market can do that. Domestic market alone cannot do that.
Okay.
Raniji, was that a satisfactory answer?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So I think
Enjoyed being with all of you. Thank you very much.
thank you so much. I think with this, there's some more questions, but I think maybe we can send you on the mail or something.
Yes, yes,
you
please do
know,
that. Send
which you
email,
can
I will
answer to
reply.
them.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Three more questions there, right? Okay.
Okay.
So now I would
Ladies and
request
gentlemen, may I, on
Mr.
your
D.V.
behalf,
Shastri.
compliment Preetima Kaushal on the excellent comparing moderation that she has done. Very well
Thank
done.
you so much, Dr. Atreya. It really means a lot.
Yeah, of course.
So I would now request Mr. D.V. Shastri, who's the ED GAIL and Vice Chairman of Delhi chapter, to give a formal vote of thanks.
I know Dr. Shastri recently gave a speech on ancient wisdom and Indian modern management. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, Mr. Shastri.
Yeah, thank you, Preetima ji. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes. So it is my pleasure and great privilege to express a vote of thanks on my own behalf and on behalf of entire Delhi chapter managing committee chaired by Mr. Mukesh Jain, Mr. Ajay Sahu is there, and other members of the managing committee. And it was really a very pleasant experience and enriching experience to listen to Professor Atreya. And let me share with all of you that I had the fortune of interacting with him when he transformed the performance management system of GAIL. Earlier in public sector, that was known as ACR. When we used to write our appraisal, it was called Annual Confidential Report. But during the regime of the then CMD, Mr. Prasad, Professor Atreya had advised GAIL to transform its appraisal system, and that's how from 2001 and onwards we started calling it PMS, the Performance Management System. So, sir, I am just like Eklavya because Dronacharya was not visible to Eklavya, but I have been learning from you since then.
May I make a point? This is a great satisfaction to me. I now say to people that when you die with two satisfactions. One is a professional satisfaction that you've done well in your work and career, and two, die with a life satisfaction that you've lived a useful life. And I have the deep satisfaction, which is keeping me healthy at age 80, that I have thousands of managers in the country. I cannot go into an airport or a hotel anywhere without someone saying, sir, 20 years ago, I heard you, or 30 years ago. So it is very satisfying to hear your recollection. Mr. Srinivasan, Captain Srinivasan, ex-Navy, was your director personnel at that time also. Okay. Yeah, please carry on.
So you had very beautifully set the context, sir. And the key learning was that you said that we can learn from our rival also. That's the great point. We always keep talking that, China is a threat to our economy and so on and so forth. But you highlighted the point that we should learn from them. We should take inspiration and to try to match their capabilities. And that can happen only through the human resource development, because we can buy the infrastructure, technology, everything. But unless our people are capable, we cannot expect to match or surpass the Chinese people. And then, sir, you also mentioned about the key gaps which are there in the Indian economy, because of which we are not at par with Chinese economy. And then you also suggested this in a structured manner, the ways and means to power the HRD strategies in our country. And then finally, you also came out with an action plan so that whatever we think, whatever we aspire, that can be translated into reality. and there were some good questions from the learned people. We are happy that so many good people, great people had joined the session. To mention Dr. Uddesh Kohli, Dr. Sunil Abral, Professor D.K. Benwet, Dr. Yogesh Upadhyay. As you rightly said, they have been the Pradhan Sevaks of ISTD in the past.
Yes, yes.
And we also have the chapter chairman from various ISTD chapters across the country. We had Dr. Alka Mittal. Perhaps now she has left the meeting, but she did join, Director HRO in GC. Then we have Mr. Akil Basrai,
Okay.
and there are many other national.
Many of the stalwarts of ISTD, yes.
Yeah.
My greetings to all of them. My humble pronouns to all of them.
And Dwarka Nathji is also there. So we are grateful to all of you for your active participation in this wonderful lecture by a legendary person like Dr. M.B. Atreya. And sir, whatever tips you have given during your address, all of us will make an effort to adopt those things in the areas wherever we are working, and that will be our real contribution to the national economy. It is not necessary to have some big platform for doing some big thing. Even whatever small space we have, if we follow the principles, as you said about the Shreshtha Dharma from the Bhagavad Gita, and Swadhane Nidanam Shreyam. So that's how we should work. Whatever duty is assigned to us, we should perform well rather than criticizing someone else. हम अपना काम तो अच्छे से करें, दूसरी इकोनॉमी, चाइनीज इकोनॉमी को तो हम मैच कर लेंगे, पहले अपना काम ठीक कर लें. So that is the key point. And if everybody works in that spirit, there is no doubt that India will be the number one economy in the world. So with these words, I once again express deep gratitude and thanks to Professor Atreya for sparing his valuable time in enlightening all of us. And sir, we would look forward to listening to you in future as well. Thank you so much.
Namaskar to all of you. Thank you for your attendance and your active participation.
नमस्कार सर, प्रणाम सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर आपका. We are really grateful to you for your time.
मैं तो आपका सेवक हूँ, आप फरमाइए, हुक्म दीजिए, मैं आ जाऊंगा.
आप हमारे मेंटर हैं सर, गाइड हैं, हमारे गॉडफादर हैं सर. In management, we learn lot of things from you, sir.
गुरु पहले शिष्य का सेवा करते हैं, बाद में शिष्य गुरु का सेवा.
You will keep blessing Delhi chapter, sir.
Yes, of course. You have taken me to Delhi, to Gurgaon chapter, in the region, so many times. Yeah. So pleasure being with all of you. I mean, as you said, it is from member to member. So I'm just one member talking. It's a highly democratic and participatory exercise. I appreciate the questions, and I also appreciate the word of thanks, which was not a formality, but genuinely summarizing some of the main points of the talk, sharing personal experience. And I sense in Dr. Shastri a commitment to action. So the dakshina, if any, that you can give me is that all of you should be vigorously acting on this vision and reducing the gap with China. Thank you.
Sure, sir.
Brilliant session once again, sir.
Thank
Sumit
you.
here.
Thank you.
Dr. Atreya, namaskar, sir. Namaskar,
Namaskar.
Akil Basrai. Thank you for the session, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, your valuable time on a winter evening.
It's a privilege to
highly
hear you,
polluted
sir.
air. Is Udesh Bhai there in the audience?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I got disconnected.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Dr. Atreya, PDN here, Dwarkanath.
Oh, how are you, PDS?
Thank
Very
you,
nice.
sir. Thank you.
He and
Nice
I
to
have
hear
worked
you.
together
Yes,